Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'm KT, and this is what happened. Have you ever heard of the phrase the real McCoy? Did you know that it was coined because of this man, Elijah J. McCoy? He was a Canadian American that changed the way the railroad industry ran. He changed the way we iron our clothes. He even changed the way we keep our lawns green. He did such an amazing job that his very name coined a phrase that is used by people still today in multiple nations. Let me cite my sources for Elijah McCoy. I largely use the National Park Service's website. That's the United States one. I also use biography.com. They have a tab for inventors. And I use the United States Patent and Trademark Office. You can search trademark and patented things of today and of the past. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you about the real McCoy. Let's get into part one, A Free Life. Before we can talk about Mr. Elijah J. McCoy, we have to talk about his parents. His parents had been slaves in Kentucky, and they were George and Mildred Goins McCoy. At some point, they used the Underground Railroad, which was a famous network of people who believed that slaves should be free. These abolitionists worked hard to get as many people to freedom as was possible. In this case, George and Mildred ended up going through the network up through Detroit and into Canada. They ended up in Colchester, Ontario, which at the time was called Upper Canada. George and Mildred had a total of 10 children, and they were born in Ontario. Elijah was born in 1844, and it was important to note that at this time, the schools in Upper Canada were segregated. That meant that black children went to one school and white children went to another. And we also have to note that oftentimes the black schools were severely underfunded than the white schools. This meant that Elijah had been educated in that segregated school system. But at the age of 15, his parents decided that he was going to go to school to further his potential because they noted that he was very intelligent. So they sent him to a school in Scotland. While there, he attended the University of Edinburgh and he got certified as a mechanical engineer. Now, during this time, while he was getting his education in Scotland, we know from census records that his parents had relocated to Michigan. So by the time Elijah returned home, his family had established themselves on a farm. So when he returned, he jumped right in. This was a tobacco farm. As he got a little older, he decided to use his skills that he had learned on the tobacco farm to open his very first business, which was a tobacco and cigar business. With that, let's go into part two. I'm going to call part two Refusing to Be Less. Now, here we have Elijah McCoy, who is degreed and certified in mechanical engineering from the University of Edinburgh. Guess what? In the United States, he cannot find a job in engineering because he is a black man. And you may say, KT, how do you know? It could be that there were no jobs. No, during that time in the United States, black people were not allowed to hold skilled professional positions. So he ended up taking a job at the Michigan Central Railroad as a fireman and an oiler. This is where his engineering brain got to stretch because he noticed some issues. During this time, railroad engines needed to be lubricated so that they could keep running smoothly. The problem was the engines would get hot, so sometimes they would need to stop the engines to let them cool down so they could be lubricated. One of Mr. McCoy's first inventions was a lubricating cup that allowed the engine to be lubricated evenly across the parts without having to stop the train. Let me tell you, honey, it didn't matter that he was a black man because this saved the railroad company so much money that they could not ignore the invention, and thus he patented his first invention that he called improvement in lubricators for steam engines. Because they already had lubricators on the engines, they just weren't very efficient. So while Elijah McCoy worked at the railroad, he continued to notice issues like this that he could solve because he was a mechanical engineer and he was a good one. He continued to refine devices to make them work better, which profited the railroad greatly and led him to file nearly 60 patents, most of them pertaining to railroad parts. But we're going to talk about the other ones in just a minute. This leads to the phrase, the real McCoy, because these were typical problems across other railroad lines too, worldwide, right? There were other people who invented parts and things that would make these issues function a little bit better, but it became an unofficial consensus that the McCoy parts were the best parts. So when railroaders would come to ask for a lubricating cup or one of the other many inventions, to make sure they got the right one, they would ask for the McCoy invention. This eventually turns into, give me the real McCoy. When we see something and we want the real thing, that's the real McCoy. We still say it, I still say it to this day. But let's get into the rest of his life and other inventions. In 1868, Mr. McCoy did get married to Anne Elizabeth Stewart. She did die 4 years later, so he ended up getting married again to Mary Eleanor Delaney. And he got married about a year after Anne Elizabeth died. During this time, he continued to invent things, and not just for the railroad. He started to invent things that would change everyday life inside of households. Now, there were ironing boards, but Elijah McCoy patented a portable folding ironing board. This ironing board was portable, but it was later refined and improved by another inventor who happened to be a black woman named Sarah Boone. But she may have her own story on this channel. Also, do you like to keep your lawn green and water during the summer and hot months? Well, Elijah McCoy invented a lawn sprinkler system that he patented. This man really changed the way things were done, and he really had an eye for seeing how you could automate things, make them be more efficient and done in a better way. While Elijah McCoy was married to Mary Delaney, they moved to Detroit, where she helped found the Phyllis Wheatley Home for Aged Colored Men. Phyllis Wheatley was a transformational black poet, so they named the house after her, and yeah, it was like a retirement home for black men. When Elijah McCoy was 78, he and his wife Mary were in a car accident. Mrs. McCoy unfortunately died in this car wreck, while Mr. McCoy suffered horrible injuries that he never really healed from, but he did live 7 more years. Even though he died at the age of 85, it was largely a result of these injuries suffered in this car wreck. He was buried in Detroit Memorial Park in East Warren, Michigan. The year was 1929. Fast forward to 2012, Elijah McCoy was honored when the United States Patent and Trademark Office named its first regional office in Detroit, Michigan, the Elijah J. McCoy Midwest Regional Patent Office. Elijah McCoy was a prolific inventor. He had 57 patents to his name. He made lasting improvements in the world, and most importantly, he left us his name. With that, let's go into part 3, my final thoughts. I think Elijah McCoy's story is an amazing story, starting with his parents escaping slavery, even being able to send him to Scotland to get a better education than he could get if he continued on in segregated Canada. Once he came back to the United States, he overcame even more barriers, because just imagine having a mechanical engineering degree, having more education than your white counterparts, but not being able to get that job simply because you are black and it is not allowed. But then going on to change the way the railroads ran, to change the efficiency so much that one thing they weren't going to ignore was the profits, because baby, they were going to make the money, and they didn't care who invented it. Baby, you could have been a space alien with gray skin. If you were going to get them the profits, they were going to use the invention. I just think his is a story of, I don't want to say overcoming. It was literally refusing to let anybody tell him that he was worth less, that he wasn't worth as much simply because he was black. Not only that, he didn't let people tell him, you're not going to use your degree here. You're not going to use it. He did it anyway. That's not always possible or easy. So these are long running racial issues that still need to be overcome to this day. Things have gotten better, but not where they should be. So anytime I see someone like an Elijah McCoy who did fantastic things, I always wonder how much more would they have done or could they have done if they were not struggling to overcome racism and prejudice while also trying to exercise their creative minds. Also, I didn't mention it in the video, but Elijah McCoy did not have children. And it goes to show that you don't have to have children to make a difference in the world, to leave a lasting legacy, because he left his name as the legacy. And I guarantee you, if you have never said the Real McCoy, then and you've seen it in a movie for sure. My mission here is to bring you things you may not have known. So if you've never heard the Real McCoy, now you have. If you have a dream and it is something that is really important to you, you keep pushing forward, you keep trying, because if this is something that you are supposed to do and you keep trying, it will pay off. And not only will it pay off for you, it may change someone else's life. So guys, I hope that you enjoyed the story of Mr. Elijah J. McCoy, mechanical engineer. So guys, until next time, remember, keep learning and reading, be happy, and always have a blessed day. Bye-bye.